Hello, this is Taylor. If you're new here, I am a 26-year-old former management consultant and YouTuber, recently turned full-time YouTuber, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. How I balanced 2 full-time jobs for 3 years. And spoiler alert, I'm not just going to tell you the typical productivity tips and tricks like time blocking and prioritizing, partially because I don't just want to make a run-of-the-mill productivity video, but mainly because I genuinely didn't even do those things. I'm not awesome at time management, believe it or not. So yeah, these tips might not be what you're expecting. And at the very end, we're gonna discuss whether I would even recommend this, to have 2 jobs and build the other one up until it can stand on its own, or to just go all in on the one that you presumably love. And I gotta address something kind of important right now. A lot of people referred to my management consulting job as my 9-to-5. And I need to clarify, management consulting is anything but a 9-to-5. It was more like 10 to 12-hour days on average, with exceptions, and I definitely took advantage of those exceptions, but certainly not a 9-to-5. And I don't tell you that to be self-aggrandizing, but to highlight the actual scarcity of time that I had left over to dedicate to YouTube. Because these tips would actually be quite different if consulting was a 9-to-5. That actually leaves you with a decent amount of extra time. So yeah, I just had to flag that. So let's jump in. And if you've been here before and you care to like and subscribe, it helps me out a lot, and it's my full-time job now, so I would really appreciate it. All right, let's go. All right, the first thing I did is less of a thing and more so me laying some really important groundwork here. I leveraged my genuine passion as fuel and motivation. A lot of buzzwords, I know, it sounds great, Taylor, what does that even mean? So let's talk about what I mean, why I think it's so important, and how this could apply to you. So when my friends would ask me this question, how do you do the 2 jobs? My answer was always, I don't know, I just do it, or I just do it through brute force. I know I've said before. And that is the truth. But when I sat down to write this video, I was like, okay, Taylor, but how? And I came to the kind of annoyingly simple conclusion that I was able to do both because I actually wanted to do it. I wanted to do YouTube. And so before diving into the more nuanced tips, because I do have some, I do think it's important to note that at a high level, it was this genuine love for the thing that kept me doing it. Because I could have just easily stayed in consulting or stayed in the corporate world and just said peace to YouTube forever as that fun side hustle I did during COVID. But no, it was the thing that energized me and gave me purpose and fulfillment a lot more than consulting did. I don't tell you this so you think, oh wow, she's so passionate. No, it's because all the best time management and productivity tips in the world would not have got me to put in the hours on some side hustle with the free time that I had when consulting left me with so little free time to start with. I did it because I wanted to do it, period. Dare I say I needed to do it, but more on that later. So last thing on this, to be brutally honest, if your second job or side hustle doesn't give you that same feeling of energy and motivation, I doubt it would be sustainable to maintain alongside another demanding full-time job like consulting, unless you're an absolute machine and just don't care about having a social life. So what's the tip here? Well, like I said, it's less of a tip and more so laying some groundwork, but if I had to squeeze a tip out of it, I would say to really pay attention to what energizes you and figure out how to harness that. Because once you know what that thing is for you, putting in the hours for it really doesn't feel like work. And I just think it's a really cool thing to know what that thing is for you. Okay, now let's get into what you came here for. Cold, hard tips and tricks. Next thing I did, actually did, was efficient creation. This tip might sound very specific to video making, but stay with me, it will apply more broadly as well. So, efficient creation. While I was doing both jobs, I simply had much less time to dedicate to YouTube, obviously. And so when I did make videos, I focused on making ones with a workflow that best fit with my consulting schedule. Typically, those videos were sit-down videos like this one. These types of videos are more efficient to make because most of the work is in the script writing rather than in the filming or the editing. And this was more efficient for me because what I could do was pull out a script and write for 20 or 30 minutes at a time when I had breaks from consulting. What I could not do, unfortunately, was edit a video for 20, 30 minutes at a time because I need many hours to get in a creative flow to do good editing personally. And I couldn't just film for 30 minutes at a time. I mean, vlogs maybe, but I had nothing in my life film worthy during my 30-minute breaks, I'll tell you that much. It would just be like me in the bathroom looking through memes. So what my YouTube workflow looked like during this time was I would chip away little by little at a script. Once it was ready, I would film the entire thing on a Saturday or Sunday, and then I would edit it the following weekend, or if I had a good amount of free hours some weekday evenings and I had the energy to do it, I would work on it then. And these sit-down videos are also much easier to edit than, say, a vlog, because it's mainly just Cutting, transitions, audio adjustments, overlays, versus vlogs are much more involved. So applying this to a broader audience not making videos, figure out what parts of your workflow you can do for small chunks at a time versus the ones where you actually need many hours to do a good job at it. This will differ person to person. I wish I could just knock out some editing in small time increments, but I know I can't. What I can do in small increments is write. So figuring out how I kind of mentally compartmentalize these different parts of my workflow definitely helped me balance it alongside my consulting job. It is very worth noting that I don't think I made my best videos during this time, but I do think that quantity produces quality to some extent. You need to get your reps in, and so at least I made them, and done is better than perfect a lot of the time. The third thing I did, perhaps counterintuitively, was I actually took breaks, like seriously, and this was essential for being able to balance the two. So to be totally clear, I posted videos very infrequently while I was in consulting compared to now. And that's because, while it might not sound like it, I only made videos when I had some time to do it. If I was on a crazy project with long hours in consulting, I wasn't making videos, period. Because with whatever little slivers of free time I had during the crazy projects, I'd usually take those to relax or see friends or catch up on sleep, just the basic, mental sanity maintenance. Because if I held myself to the standard of posting videos every few weeks while I was also in consulting, I would have totally burned out, like permanently, and fallen out of love with it. Now, to be fair to myself, when I was on more chill consulting projects and actually had some free time in the evenings and more energy on the weekends because I'd be more well rested, I was pretty good at taking advantage of that free time. But more on how I took advantage of that free time in a minute. So my tip here was very simple. I think it's counterproductive to force yourself to work past a reasonable capacity, even if it's on something you love. Take breaks when you need to, maintain a social life, otherwise things can get pretty lonely pretty fast. Next thing I did was always keep sight of my long-term goal. Just pretend it's over there. Whatever that is for you, write that shit down. Of course, it can be subject to change. In fact, I actually think it should be. I don't think we should box ourselves in as we grow and change and evolve as people, because goals change with us. But in my case, I knew that I only wanted to be in consulting for about 2 years before moving on to something else, which is actually normal, by the way. The average lifespan of a consultant is a little over 2 years, which might sound weird, but that's the business model. So I knew I wanted to learn as much as I could while I was in consulting, build my consulting toolkit, as they call it, and then move on to something more specific and tailored to my interests afterwards. After not too long though, I realized that I wanted that thing afterwards to be my own business, specifically my YouTube channel and the revenue streams and business that you can build off of that. And so knowing that that's what I was working towards and had to look forward to was a really helpful North Star in keeping myself energized and motivated. And this especially came in handy during the most challenging times in consulting. And you might think, well, Taylor, if you knew that that's what you wanted to do the whole time, didn't that make you super unmotivated to do a good job at consulting? At the very end, yes. But for almost the whole entire time before that, no, actually. I actually noticed that rising tides on my YouTube channel also lifted my consulting boats. I don't know why I'm speaking in metaphor, but basically I noticed that when my YouTube channel was doing well, I also felt more energized and motivated to do a good job at my consulting job. So what's the tip here? Keep those North Star goals in mind. Without them, I think it can be very easy to just kind of stay where you are without actually thinking about why you're there. And I am just a huge proponent of being very intentional with these career decisions. Even if you stay right where you are, that's perfectly awesome. I'm not saying, fuck the corporate job for everyone. But having a reason for being where you are, I think is very important. Even if that reason is that it's a really good stepping stone. Hello. So I actually conflated just general career advice that I would give with the tip. So the general career advice is, just think if my room is messy. The general career advice is what I just said, to keep those long-term goals in mind, because I think it really helps you make intentional career decisions. I stand by that. But that's actually not the tip here. The tip was not necessarily have a side hustle, but to have hobbies and passions and things that you like working on outside of work, because that at least helped me stay motivated and energized in my consulting job. So they're two separate things. It's a very kind of hard to notice difference, but you know what I mean? Did I need to do this aside? Maybe not. Let's carry on. The next thing I did was surround myself with winners. But actually, this isn't something I did consciously, but the people that, like my friends that I spent time with during this era, who are largely still the people I spent time with, absolutely encouraged my dual pursuits and didn't make me feel weird or self-conscious for doing this other thing that was not traditional compared to the rest of my peers, which is more important than you might think, by the way. I know what it feels like to not have a supportive network, and it is not fun. So the tip here is to really pay attention to this. Take a look at your circle and ask yourself, are these people bringing me up and encouraging my passions? Because without that, having to rely on your own conviction and gut feeling, it's doable, but it is much harder. The next tip is as close as we're gonna get to a typical productivity hack, but I'm gonna try and add some nuance. I effectively took advantage of my free time. So by effectively, I don't just mean that I worked on YouTube when I had free time instead of scrolling on social media. I mean that I paid attention to what times during the week I felt the most effective and creatively inspired and planned to do my most creative work during those times. I call those times my effective windows. I just made that up, but I think it's good. Versus some other times when I might have had some free hours in the evening after I finished my consulting work, but I felt kind of mentally drained from the day. Sure, that's free time, but it's not an effective window. And so I would just do like YouTube admin work or just some kind of work that didn't involve creativity. An actual example for me that I lived by when I had both jobs, my most effective window was on Sundays. Because by the time Sunday rolled around, usually I had caught up on a little bit of sleep, or at the very least had fun with friends on Friday and Saturday. And so I felt motivated and energized by the time Sunday came to work on YouTube. Plus, I've always kind of treated Sunday like more of a me day where I can choose to do whatever I want. And like I said, I wanted to do YouTube. So I usually did most of my video editing on Sundays. I'd go for a walk if the weather was nice, grab my coffee, you know, a tailored day. So the tip here is kind of similar to what I said earlier about paying attention to which parts of your workflow you can do a little bit out of a time versus what you need like a lot of hours for, but it's slightly different. Pay attention to the times in your week and the places where you feel the most creative, inspired, or effective, and plan your work accordingly. And you can kind of combine these tips. So for the parts of your workflow that are much harder and require more creative juices, sync those up to the effective windows. Whatever it looks like for you, I think this is a good way to just more effectively squeeze out good work from the limited amount of time that you have. So would I even recommend doing what I did, having two jobs, specifically one very demanding full-time job and one side hustle or other thing that you're very passionate about? Yes and no. Yes, because from a risk mitigation standpoint, I had built a strong enough foundation with YouTube that by the time I left consulting, it was more of a calculated risk than a rash one. And doing both for the 3 years that I did is what allowed me to build that foundation and have so much conviction around my decision. But it was really hard. I will not sugarcoat it, and that might be why this list of tips feels kind of short and like not your typical practical ones, because I really wasn't even in a place to balance the two jobs. I found it to be very unsustainable, and if I had kept up with it the way I was doing it, one of two things would have happened. One is it would have eventually fizzled out, like I was posting one video a month, you know, it would have turned into one video every 2 months, and it just kind of would have died a slow, painful death. Or I would have forced myself to post more frequently, and like I said, I think that would have permanently burned me out and I just would have fallen out of love with it. And so while I am all for being a boss babe and having side hustles, I do think it's important to be aware of these trade-offs that you might be making. Because to be truly great and reach your potential at something, I do think you have to go all in on it, eventually. I have so many more insights into the full-time creator life and the associated finances coming very soon. So thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss it. It's totally free. And again, I would really appreciate it. Until next time, turtle out. Also, did you spot the turtle?